Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of this F1 24 driver career mode with myself driving for RB in our second season as a Formula 1 driver. If you did miss the last episode around the Imola Grand Prix circuit, it was a Max Verstappen domination. He will take win number 4 from 4 races so far this season, and he is definitely on his revenge tour after losing out in the championship finale last season. Norris, he will take P2, and Russell, just doing George Russell things, manages to get a podium out of nowhere after benefiting from our gearbox failure. We were running in third, had an absolute ripper race. We made our way through the field from starting inside the top 10, and with a few laps to go, the gearbox let go, seized up, and that was our day done. Max Verstappen leads the Drivers' Championship by 49 points to Lando Norris. That's George Russell P3, 51 points behind. Myself, after that DNF, we dropped even further down the leading board to P11, 96 points behind, and Daniel Ricciardo P17. Red Bull, though, they lead the Constructors' Championship by 34 points to McLaren. Mercedes in third, they're 72 points behind, and RB, we find ourselves 130 points behind in P6, but we are going to go straight into our R&D and the durability. We have a major energy store upgrade ready for us, and since this is a major upgrade, I will be doing just a standard development, which will mean it won't be on the car until the Spanish Grand Prix, but it does also have a 0% failure rate, so it will be on the car 100% in time for Spain. And then we'll also take a look at the powertrain, a minor engine power upgrade. Since both development rates will actually arrive before the Canadian Grand Prix, we will do the standard development since it is also a 0% failure rate to ensure that it is on the car in time. And weather for the weekend looks pretty interesting, with a small shower in the second half of the Grand Prix, which could result in a small spin on and maybe the intermediates, depending how much rain actually does fall. And now looking at the larger picture, Red Bull remained as the clear fastest car on the grid. Aston Martin, they're also closing the gap to McLaren as they didn't bring any upgrades this weekend. Sauber, by far the biggest movers, as they are now 4th quickest team on the grid, jumping the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari. And we also make a large jump in performance ourselves, now nearly on par with the performance as the Ferraris. There is also now a very large gap to the bottom 3 teams, being Alpine, Williams and Haas, as we get ready for qualifying.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here in Canada at the wonderful Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Who's going to come out fastest of all in the next hour? Yes, it's time for qualifying.
High risk, high reward for this circuit, especially the final chicane at the Wall of Champions, as we go through the Wall of Champions now, and there is a tiny little bit of contact there on the exit as we come to the end of our first flying lap, and it's going to be a P6 for ourselves at the minute. Lando Norris does set the fastest lap of the session so far, and once again coming through the final chicane, and we will cross the line this time around, and it is going to be a P12, so I'm not feeling very safe with that. So we have come out on another set of tyres, a fresh set of tyres, but you can see we're really struggling. We're really losing the pace, and I just do not know where I'm going wrong. I feel like I have been absolutely thrashing the car around, and that is the reason I have not turned on my ERS, and that will do it. So we back out of it, and hopefully we can make it through into the next part of qualifying. Verstappen is fastest by 0.2 of a second to Lando Norris. Leclerc's in P3, 0.2 behind, and I just scraped through by 400s, knocking out our teammate Daniel Ricciardo. And it also knocked down Q1, Albon, Hulkenberg, Zhou, and Logan Sargent as we come to the start of the final sector of our first lap in this second part of qualifying. You'll see Max Verstappen has actually made an overtake on us. Normally, if something like this happens, I will actually back out of the lap. But this time, with just how dominant that Red Bull is, I'm going to stick with it and try and see if I can't use the slipstream down these last 2 straights here to see if I can't actually make up any of that time that I lost by having to let Verstappen through. And we make a tiny little bit of contact once again through the Wall of Champions. So far being very lucky with the contact we're making there. Verstappen does go fast as we go P10. And you see that dropped us all the way now down to P15. I have fueled up the car this time around to go for 2 laps if I need it. And P5, I'll take that. I don't think I'll need another lap here. So we'll fast forward it to the end of the session. Verstappen, he's fastest in Q2 by 0.3 to Lewis Hamilton. Yuki Tsunoda in P3, 0.3 behind. Myself, P5, 4.0 behind. And knocked down in Q2. Valtteri Bottas, Sergio Perez in that all-dominant Red Bull. He's knocked out. Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, and the home driver Lance Stroll has not made it into the final part of qualifying in that Aston Martin. And Fernando Alonso, his teammate, he starts off by going quickest in this session so far. Myself down to P9 at the moment, about to set our first lap on a set of scrub tyres. and we stay P9 half a second away from Lando Norris. But we've got this one final lap coming through here, a bit hesitant on the turn in there into the final chicane, but we really thrash it over the curbs. We're 7/10 up, and where is that going to put us for the Grand Prix on Sunday? It is P6, so a very good finish for ourselves there to qualify. Max Verstappen, he's fastest by a 10th, and will take pole position for the Canadian Grand Prix ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Fernando Alonso in P3, 2/10 behind.
We're back once again beside the St. Lawrence River here in Montreal for the Canadian Grand Prix. The event first moved to the variant of this track back in 1978, and it was won by none other than Gilles Villeneuve, the first Canadian to ever win his home race, and in whose honour the circuit would be renamed. If you want flat-out racing, you've come to the right place this weekend, as it's full throttle for 59% of this 2.7-mile circuit, peaking at around 210 miles per hour going into the final chicane. But that speed requires discipline, and there are more than a few close walls here just waiting to punish drivers with a heavy right foot. It's time to take a look at our starting grid for today's race. Max Verstappen put in a fantastic lap yesterday, and he'll start from pole position. And it's Lewis Hamilton alongside. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Fernando Alonso, Tsunoda, Sainz, Lightning, Leclerc, Norris, Oscar Piastri, Russell, Bottas, Perez, Gasly, Ocon, Stroll, Ricciardo, Albon, Hulkenberg, Joe, and Logan Sargent. With preparations almost complete, let's head down to the track. And alongside me in the commentary box today, former racing driver herself, Naomi Schiff. I know what we've got to do before the start of today's race, but what about our driver? What do the final hours look like for them?
Well, every driver certainly has their own way of preparing themselves before a race. But I can tell you that pre-race rituals are a real thing. When I was in go-karting, I used to touch every wheel in a specific sequence before I got into the kart. And then I stepped up to cars and had a specific set of fireproof base layers just for race day. So watch the drivers when they're on the grid. Some may be sitting on the floor and isolating, others may be up to other things that they do. But these little things really help their minds get ready for the race.
Alrighty, you can see here that the strategy is the medium to the hard tyre boxing on lap 16, but there's rain coming towards the end of the race. So I really want to try and see if we can't make something out of that with the strategy. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm actually going to bring the pit window forward to lap 14, a couple of laps sooner, to try and see if that rain does take a little bit longer to come in, that we can try and create some sort of undercut on some new tyres. But we are away for the Canadian Grand Prix. It's a pretty mediocre start there. I forgot to engage the clutch, and so it was a bit of an awkward start. But we remained side by side with Charles Leclerc going through the first couple of corners there. Ahead of us, it's Carlos Sainz and Yuki Tsunoda. They're continuing to go side by side, but Leclerc, surprisingly, has actually managed to stay ahead of us there. And we will end up actually getting the position ahead of him, coming down to the hill there and taking a look at the rest of the top 10. So it's Leclerc and Norris. Norris, so far, the only person I can take note of who is on the hard tyres. And then it's George Russell and Oscar Piastri rounding out the points. He is also on the hard tyres, so McLaren looking like they're wanting to extend just like they did in Imola. And that is going to put them on the back foot here in the first stint here, as Valtteri Bottas makes the move to get himself up into the points there in the Sauber on to lap 3, going on to lap 4, and back on board with ourselves here. We've got our first objective of the race. We need to overtake Tsunoda, and I completely agree with Mark here. We've got Lewis Hamilton up ahead of us. He is creating a bit of a bottleneck here, and well, he is the bottleneck as Verstappen. He's bolted. He's like 3 or 4 seconds ahead of us now, and we are at the back of this train with Charles Leclerc just within the DRS of ourselves. But further behind, it is George Russell now looking to try and get himself ahead of the other McLaren that is also on the hard tyres, and he'll sweep around the outside going to the final chicane, and that is him now up into P8 and on board with ourselves again here. We've got a very good run, a very, very good run coming out of this final chicane here. We're going to dump a heap of the ERS to try and get ourselves alongside Yuki Tsunoda, and down the inside into turn 1 we will get the position away and into the top 5 now that we go. And behind us, Norris and George Russell now are battling it out. Once again, is Norris going to be able to take that position back away from George Russell after he only just lost it? No, George Russell will be able to just stay ahead this time around, and we'll do a bit of an order check here as the first 10 laps have now elapsed. So Max Verstappen has got a 5-second lead over Lewis Hamilton, then Fernando Alonso rounds out the podium. Carlos Sainz and myself now up into P5. Yuki Tsunoda, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Lando Norris, and Valtteri Bottas is currently rounding out the top 10 as he is now under attack from Oscar Piastri, that is, and he will maintain that position. And Pierre Gasly and Sergio Perez is in P13, Stroll in P14, yet to make up any positions really. They're trying to get himself the points at his home race. And then it's Ocon, Ricciardo, Albon, the two Hasses of Hulkenberg, Zhou, and Logan Sargent is the final car on the road at the moment. And once again, we're getting a really good exit coming out of this final chicane here, and we are looking to line up a identical move we did to Tsunoda, but now onto Carlos Sainz, and we will send it down the inside, and that is now us up into P4, and we've got our eyes on the podium. Fernando Alonso just right ahead of us, and behind us once again Piastri is now battling it out with Valtteri Bottas. Is he going to be able to take that points position back away from the finished driver? And he will be able to get the move done with the better traction around the outside at turn 2, and we'll continue on it now to Fernando Alonso. He is looking to try and get himself finally ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton's only been leading this train for pretty much the entire race. He lost out all that time to Max Verstappen right at the start, and he will get the move done, but that's going to hold up Lewis Hamilton as he cuts him off at the apex, and I've had to slam the brakes on the apex of the chicane, and now that's left us slightly vulnerable to Sainz, but luckily we've got just enough straight line speed with the DRS to maintain P4 at the moment, and we'll have to reset and try and find another way around Lewis Hamilton, unfortunately not being able to take advantage of that a little bit of a issue there for Hamilton. And now an even bigger issue for Yuki Tsunoda, who is going to pull off to the side of the road with some sort of mechanical issue, and that is the Japanese driver now out of the race. And for ourselves, we're having a look here at the weather report. We're meant to be boxing this lap, remember. Lap 14, I changed the pit lap to, and Mark is definitely saying rain is going to be here in 5 minutes, so I am going to try and extend these tyres. Initially, we were meant to go to lap 16, so I know I've got at least another 2 or 3 laps in these tyres before the grip will really start to fall away. And taking a look ahead now, you can see that we have indeed extended. We have not come into the pits. We are maintaining the strategy to try and just wait it out till the end of this dry period into the rain, and it is working out wonderfully because we have found a fair bit of traction there and managed to get ourselves ahead of Lewis Hamilton, and at the same time Lando Norris and George Russell are continuing to battle it out, with Norris finally getting himself ahead of George Russell. We've got our next objective now, and that is to achieve a fast lap, and on the very lap that we receive the objective, we will complete the objective, showing that we are currently running at a very good pace at the moment. We are currently 2 seconds slower than our best lap, but we are managing to maintain a good enough pace to stay with Fernando Alonso. You saw there a bit of a rear wheel spinning coming out of turn 2, so the tyre wear is definitely starting to kick in. But Max Verstappen, he is in for his pit stop. I am surprised Red Bull have gone for this as they're putting on the hard tyres. We will continue on once again for another lap, and that will put us now into the lead of the Canadian Grand Prix. But Max Verstappen onto the hard tyres. Is he going to be able to maybe do something that I was thinking of, to try and get out a heap of fast lap times before the rain comes? And it's definitely working because he is now ahead of Sergio Perez, his teammate, who is not yet pit. So he's already built up enough of a lead in the first stint, and now onto the new tyres. And you can see here that the rain has arrived. Lap 20, we've got 15 laps to go, and the rain has arrived. You can see there I'm very tentative on the throttle, as it is definitely a little bit more slippy out there at the moment. Fernando Alonso, he is not bothered by these conditions at the moment, as he will get ahead of Sergio Perez, but Sergio Perez, he will pull away into the pit lane now, and Max Verstappen, he's already caught up to the two McLarens that are also yet to pit. Oscar Piastri makes a mistake, so an easy overtake there for Max Verstappen to get himself back into the podium. Oscar Piastri, though, very costly mistake. It looks like he is also trying to wait it out and essentially do a one-stop, and we are now finally coming in. The DRS has been disabled now, which means that I don't need to go onto another dry compound. It's been declared a wet race. I can go onto those intermediate tyres and go to the end, and that is exactly what we're doing. Intermediates now going onto the car. It's a 2.4 seconds pit stop, and we will lose out a couple of positions there to George Russell and Charles Leclerc, and I didn't catch who has stayed out for another lap as well. But either way, I am not too concerned because they are now on dry tyres on a very wet track, and you'll see here immediately just coming out of the pit lane, 3 tenths, 4 tenths. We are just gaining so much time on Charles Leclerc at the moment, and there he is, very slow on the dry tyres. He's still on the hard tyres, so he's already made a pit stop as well, I'd believe, and we're going to come from miles behind and make an overtake there on Charles Leclerc. It's Oscar Piastri who's also stayed out. George Russell will be our next one that we're going to be trying to get by, and hopefully not hold us up too long. We're hoping that the AI could maybe hold up Max Verstappen, so then we don't get too caught up by that very dominant Red Bull. A bit of side-by-side contact with Russell as we go for that move. And here he is, Max Verstappen making his way through the traffic at the moment that aren't on the wet tyres here. And Lando Norris goes for the move into the hairpin on Max Verstappen. Verstappen loses out on a net P2 here, and he's boxed in behind George Russell now. Lando Norris, he'll bolt. He's now got himself ahead of Max Verstappen. Very opportunistic and very brave from the British driver. As Oscar Piastri now, finally, he's in the lane, and you can see his name falling down the totem pole there, but Lewis Hamilton here is looking like he is struggling. This is wet tyres. Was that a bit of a puff of smoke I just saw coming out of the rear of that Ferrari, and he comes to a stop on the side of the road. So that is 2 Ferrari power units now out of the Grand Prix. First, Yuki Tsunoda in the Sauber, and now Lewis Hamilton in the works Ferrari, not making it to the checkered flag here today in Canada. We've got another objective. We need to achieve an average lap time, which is definitely what we need at the moment to try and keep ourselves distracted on the closing gap from Lando Norris. It was over 3 seconds, and it's now less than 3, 2.8 as it stands now, and a bit of a top 10 check there with Leclerc rounding out the points at the moment. So at least Ferrari could come home with some sort of points today here in Canada. We pass our objective to maintain a good average lap time, but you'll see now that gap is all the way down to 1.3 seconds, so we could be on for a pretty close finish here if I don't kick it into another gear here. Valtteri Bottas, he's looking very strong, and P8 as he locks up both fronts, and he's made a mistake. That's allowed George Russell to go through, and now Charles Leclerc, he could gain another point here for Ferrari. Goes around the outside of Valtteri Bottas, and that is him up into P9, so a very costly mistake from Bottas. That could have been a P8 for him and Sauber, but fast forwarding to ourselves now through the final chicane for the final time, and we will come across the line. We're going to be victorious for the first time with RB, and we take victory here in Canada for the Canadian Grand Prix, and it is just not a race win I was expecting here today. Absolutely brilliant strategy from ourselves to pretty much outlast the rain and try and just make this a one-stop race, even though most of the field went for a 2. George Russell, driver of the day here as well.
A truly magnificent drive and a great performance from the entire team to secure victory here in Canada.
It's not every day that we get to see such incredible wheel-to-wheel racing. Next time, they might consider making it easier for themselves, but today, we absolutely loved all the action that we got to see out there.
As we await the winners to take their positions on the podium, one thing is clear today. RB have really shown their prowess on the track. This is a team that isn't afraid to take risks, whether that's on the circuit or in the new talents they hire. Today, those risks certainly paid off.
Yeah, strategy definitely won the race here today. Making that a one-stop race really helped. Max Verstappen and Lando Norris, I think they both ended up doing a 2-stop. Definitely Max, I'm unsure about Lando considering he started on the hards, so that strategy definitely worked for him. Norris did hold on to the P2 in the end ahead of Max Verstappen. And have we found the weakness of the Red Bull? Is it wet weather that the Red Bull cannot cope with? Because Max Verstappen, he gained on us, but it wasn't a massive amount. We managed to still beat him across the line there. And, yeah, I think we found the weakness of the Red Bull. We'll have to wait and see for the next wet race to see if that is exactly what the weakness is. Max Verstappen, though, he will continue to lead the Drivers' Championship by 47 points to Lando Norris. Russell in P3, 63 points behind. Myself back inside the top 10, all the way up to P6, only 1 point behind Fernando Alonso. Red Bull lead the Constructors' Championship by 24 points to McLaren. Mercedes are sit P3, 74 points behind, and RB we're P6, 14 points behind Ferrari. And with that race win and the DNF for Hamilton, we have won our championship rivalry with Lewis Hamilton, which is going to be absolutely mega to go against our CV. And for our driver ratings, our experience and awareness have gained some points. Racecraft to level 89, pace to level 89, focus to level 85, and our overall is just shy of leveling up, but it still sits at an overall rating of level 88, and our recognition remains at 58% to Daniel Ricciardo, so need to bump that up just to get to the next lot of R&D points to 60%. And for the next episode, we have got another secret meeting with Mercedes, and at this stage I'm not sure if I will continue the talks just based off how dominant the Red Bull is, and that is the team I want to try and get myself into and continue my relationship with Red Bull. But the fact that Mercedes is also falling down the order a little bit does make it a bit tricky to kind of know whether if they could make a bounce back or not. We'll just have to continue talking with them and seeing how their R&D goes for the rest of the season, and that is going to be all for this episode, and I'll see you when we go to Catalonia for the Spanish Grand Prix. I'll see you then.